Hey there class, this is your instructor Roy Smalley from the Mayville Fire Department, and I'm here to review with you how to refill a pressurized water canister. After you have used it at a scene, you definitely want to make sure you come back and get it ready for service again. So that's what we're going to do. Tools you're going to need 2 gallons of water. You're going to need foam and a measuring cup. You're going to need the channel locks, and you're going to need a Schrader valve chuck to go on the end of the air hose. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to discharge any remaining pressure on there to make it possible to release that nut. If there's too much residual pressure, that nut is not going to let go. Just like in your FCBA. I'm discharging this right into our holding area here to release all that residual pressure, and once it starts to sputter and slow down, you know that pressure is gone and we can open it back up. I'm going to then use the channel locks to release that nut. It should release fairly easily. When we tighten it back up, we're not going to tighten it up very tight. Just hand tight and then snug it a little bit is great. I'm just unscrewing it here to release. Sometimes toward the top of that it can get a little bit sticky, so I'm going to use those channel locks again to get the last few twists out, and then I should be able to lift out the hose assembly with the stem. So I'm going to set that aside for now. Inside, you also want to notice that there is a plastic sheath that goes around the stem for the hose assembly. That plastic sheath, if you're going to eyeball and not actually measure the foam inside, measure the water inside, this gives you an idea of where the bottom level of that water should be. I'm going to set that aside as well because I happen to have water pre-measured, and I'm just going to pour it straight in using our multi-purpose funnel. Very carefully pouring it in to avoid spillage. You'll notice I'm doing this over the top of the grate for a holding area, which helps with cleanup if I happen to spill a little water. I'm also pouring very carefully to make sure that any residual foam inside doesn't continue to make bubbles as I pour, which can make my job a lot harder. Again, you can't just fill this directly from the hose using that plastic sheath for the hose stem as a guide to know about where the bottom level of water should be when you fill it up. Here at our department, we just used 2 gallons of water to 1 cup of our foam concentrate. And then after that, we're going to repressurize to 100 pounds. I'm almost done pouring in my 2 gallons of water. And there we go. I can hear a little sputtering around where some bubbles from residual foam were activated by the pouring water. There. So I'm just going to knock that off the sides, and now we're ready to get the foam. So I've got my foam concentrate and a 1 cup measure. I'm going to measure out 1 cup of my foam and carefully pour that into my can. Again, I'm going to notice some bubbles coming up from residual foam from when I poured the water in. That's one of the reasons why I like to use the pre-measured water rather than the hose. The hose tends to make even more bubbles as you pour that in. But good foam makes good bubbles, so we know we're going to do a good job. So once the foam and the water is in there, we're ready to put that sheath and hose assembly back on. Now, before you put that on, you want to just double check underneath and make sure that the O-ring in there is still in place. Sometimes that'll pop off, and if it's still in place, you know you're going to get a good seal and not leak once you start to pressurize it. I'm going to start to hand tighten that down. And what I'm doing as I hand tighten that is I'm making sure that the hose on the hose assembly stays at 90 degrees to the ring through which our shoulder strap is tied. If that hose assembly was in line over the top of that ring, you could have trouble with that hose bumping into the shoulder strap as you use it, or you could also run into trouble with the hose strap accidentally activating the handle, discharging the foam. I'm going to give it just a little snug down, and it's ready to go and pressurize. So now that I'm ready to pressurize, I'm going to take my Schrader valve chuck and attach it to the end of my pressure hose. Remove the valve cap and just apply straight, even pressure. You don't want to pressure and remove, pressure and remove. I'm going to apply that pressure and hold until I get to 100 psi to help prevent the possibility of foam backing up through that valve. So here we go. I can hear it bubbling inside, which means the pressure is getting through. So it is pressurizing inside, and I can see the needle on that valve moving up. Continuing to apply that even pressure until I can hear it stop. And I can see it's in the green, so it's at 100 psi. I'm going to pull that off, remove the Schrader valve from the air hose so I can put that back in our toolbox, and replace the valve stem cap so it doesn't get lost. Last step is to replace the pin that holds the handle in place. That pin will prevent accidental activation while it's inside the crew compartment. And then, as one final step, I'm going to use a breakable tie-off to make sure that that pin doesn't go anywhere. I'm going to snug that down, and there we go. And that is how you refill a pressurized water canister. Thank you so much for paying attention today. We'll see you for our next lesson.